Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We are on episode 65, and today we're going to start to uncover the connection between self-worth, self-esteem, and recovery. There are many closely related self words. If you can't see me, I'm doing air quotes. And ironically, self-worth, self-esteem, self-respect, self-value, and so on. But two appear to mean virtually the same exact thing. Self-worth and self-esteem. So if you have self-worth, this means that you value yourself. You believe that you're a good person who is worthy of respect. Meanwhile, self-esteem is your level of confidence in your worth and your abilities. So what exactly then is the difference between the two? Let's break it down and then understand more about feelings of self-worth and self-esteem, including how they can help you live a happy and fulfilling life. And of course, we'll be tying that into recovery as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, great topic here today, Paige. It's very important to us that we distinguish between self-esteem and self-worth, because one does not necessarily come, you might think it's a chicken and an egg thing, but it's really not. They are different things, and some might think the two items are interchangeable, the two terms are interchangeable, but they're not. Self-worth is seen as self-evaluation that is focused on internal beliefs and stable factors. So it's the whole idea of someone with high self-worth feeling valuable and deserving of love, respect, and consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Self-esteem, on the other hand, refers to individuals' qualities and characteristics that are more fluid and subject to external factors. So one is an internal worth
Mm-hmm.
knowing, and the self-esteem is the external. So the way I look at it as, that I remember it is self-esteem begins with an E, external.
Ah, yeah.
Self-worth is rooted in one's overall appraisal of their value or capabilities. So again, an internal, it's the way one feels about themselves. Some examples of self-worth include security, resilience, and character, but ongoing low self-esteem can negatively affect thinking, self-care, motivation, confidence, relationships, and more, all of which are important elements in self-worth. So again, they can severely affect one another. So if you have low self-worth and you don't think you're worthy of receiving, let's say, worthy of receiving kudos at work, you will more than likely not have high self-esteem from the work that you do because you truly don't feel like you deserve it. So they're intimately linked, but they are actually quite different in what the foundations are. So again, if you're lacking in either area, take time to explore these feelings, because the one does severely affect the other. And if you really struggle here, like I did years ago, consider working with a therapist.
And you know what I just realized when I started this episode, I didn't even take time to say hi. So, hi, Jamie, my partner.
Hello. Hello. See you.
Glad we're here together. I just was so excited. I just dove right in, I guess. I don't know. I lost my marbles there for a minute. So let's talk a little bit more about what is the difference between self-worth and self-esteem. Looking at the definitions of self-worth and self-esteem, it isn't immediately clear that they differ. And I have to tell you, I've learned a lot with doing this episode because it was hard for me to distinguish as well. But they do differ. And here's the primary difference between the two. Self-worth is seen as a self-evaluation that is focused on internal beliefs and stable factors. And we're going to get into some examples about stable factors in a little bit. Someone with high self-worth feels valuable and deserving or worthy of love, respect, and consideration. Self-esteem, on the other hand, refers to an individual's qualities and characteristics that are more fluid, subject to external factors changing, such as one's physical appearance, accomplishments, capabilities, perceived success. And we're going to break those down too. If you think about self-esteem with physical appearance, we had one of my grandchildren got her hair chopped off about 12 inches from another cousin. And so we were worried about how her self-esteem going into kindergarten on that Monday morning. And I don't know about any of you that have had a bad hair day. So that's what it makes me feel. You just want to shrink and you feel a little awkward about your physical appearance. So that makes sense to me.
Definitely. So why don't we explore where our feelings of self-worth and self-esteem come from? Feelings of self-worth and self-esteem come from one's self-concept. Plainly put, self-concept is the way one thinks about themselves. Yet our self-concept can be impacted by conscious and non-conscious factors that can then affect our judgments, moods, and behavioral patterns. Do we see how nuanced this is, Paige? This is really layered and nuanced. And it's so interesting because self-concept can also include one's description, evaluation, characteristics, qualities, skills, or roles. So again, when we think about how all of these things interplay with each other, self-concept leading into self-worth, leading into self-esteem, and all of the external and external factors or internal drivers, it's fascinating. In your opinion, Paige, maybe it is a chicken and an egg thing in your eyes. What does come first, self-esteem or self-worth?
I feel like this is a trick question.
No trick question.
Um, it's got to be self-worth, right? I mean, I would think that, in fact, I think if you have self-worth, hopefully most people are born with self-worth. I mean, I want that for every human, but I would think it would drag self-esteem and all the other self words. So self-worth has to be at the top of the totem pole, I would think.
Mhm. I Somebody asked me years ago, I think it was when I was about to go on stage or after I'd come off a stage on the Steve Harvey show and I'd been interviewed for my, greatest weight loss story. And I'm sitting there and somebody says, "Well, what was your journey really about?" And I was like, it wasn't about the weight at all. It was about finding my self-worth.
Hmm.
And because I really didn't believe that I had some beliefs around my self-worth, but certainly nothing to do with my physical appearance.
Hmm.
That was not where my self-worth laid. It was in my intellect or in my um, relationships or in my ability to connect with others, but it was not in anything physical, my physical performance, physical appearance, nothing.
Hmm.
So I agree with you. I believe self-worth does precede self-esteem. Developing self-worth helps with healthy identity formation. And the American Psychological Association also agrees with this, that they believe that self-worth precedes self-esteem. They found a positive association between positive feelings of self-worth and a high degree of self-acceptance and self-esteem. So that self-worth is the foundation to everything else. Low
Hmm.
self-esteem and feelings of worthlessness are typically associated with depressive disorders such as major depressive disorder and persistent depressive disorder. What do you think
Yeah.
about that, Paige?
Don't you think that this definitely plays into that propensity for addiction when with that low self-esteem, feelings of worthlessness, the depressive disorder, that has got to be a major factor in the role of addiction. So anyway, that's just what was popping
I agree.
into my mind. So now let's discuss the root. I really do want to get the root of self-worth and some examples of it. Self-worth is rooted in one's overall appraisal of their value or capability. Some example of self-worth include, so this is what we were talking about earlier, security. You have a sense of control over yourself and your environment. Huge, very important. Resilience. You're able to bounce back from difficult experiences. Again, huge, huge, huge skill set. Character, you maintain a moral high ground and always try to do the right thing. Another huge factor. You have clear core beliefs. You adhere to character traits you believe to be important. And we talk about that a lot in our recovery group about our value system.
Yes.
Also, you have assertiveness and boundaries. You set healthy boundaries in your relationships, drawing clear lines for what people can and can't do or say to you. That's huge as far as safety in my book.
Absolutely.
Self-compassion, you practice kindness, understanding, and patience with yourself. Also, self-love, you have a strong appreciation and adoration for yourself. Acceptance, you respect the process of life and your current chapter acknowledging that everything will or can change. Acceptance is another huge one that we talk about in recovery as well. It's like the very first step, honestly, to what the circumstances are. And then the last one is identity formation. You dedicate the time and work to getting to know your true self.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Paige, this is a big list, not only in the number of items that we just went through, but any I want to take a pause here. Do you want to make any observations about the items here?
I think, well, first of all, it's a very comprehensive list and pretty much covered everything. But when it talked about security, just having that sense of control over yourself and your environment, that is such a foundational principle that, you've got that, and then everything starts being built on top of that. So
Yeah,
I
because
can
the only thing
see.
you can control is yourself and your environment. You can't control anything else.
Also, I like that bounceability factor,
Mhm.
as we talked about in resilience. One, you and I talk about this a lot. It is what it is. We can't control it. The only thing we have control over is our reaction to things. So your ability to bounce back. Uh, you and I had been in a difficult situation the past couple of weeks, and I had made a comment to you about I was
Yeah.
proud of us of our bounceability factor, where some people just would pick up their dominoes and go home.
Mhm.
You and I were willing to be resilient and hang in there, work through a situation that we had unexpectedly
Yeah.
come up. And I think actually we're in a better position now for
Yes.
it. But just that resilience, I just had thought about that several times. Someone with less volition or maybe self-worth or um,
That's true.
confidence in their ability to do that would have said, okay, this is too big for me. I quit. We're done. So yeah, resilience, that's a big one. And that also ties into our character, because I do think we took the moral high ground
Mhm.
in the situation we were in. And it ties into our core beliefs. So really and the boundaries. We talked about boundaries too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, it all played together for us. And while it was a tough situation that was sort of we were put in, it was sort of handed to us. We didn't expect it. We had to just navigate it and quickly, figure out our way through. Paige and I stayed very connected, and I think both of us stayed very connected to our values during the whole process,
yeah,
which allowed me anyway to say, okay, how do I want to show up aligned to my values? And it did for me. It took a lot of discipline, which is one of my values, a lot of discipline
yeah,
to not say the things I wanted to say, do the things I wanted to do, not in regards to you and I, but
right.
to the outside factors. And I learned a lot, about taking the moral high ground for sure, but also um, letting, in this case, while I had plenty of ground to stand on, and I could have done it with compassion, to try to make my case or say my piece. It really it the situation we were in, it would not have landed in a way that would have been helpful or would have gotten us anything. It wouldn't have
Okay.
progressed the situation or made it better. It would have made it worse because
Right.
the other people involved were not able to process what we were saying. So we
And
had to not only take the moral high ground of just taking what was
acceptance.
given. We had to accept it, and we had to say, okay, it's my work now to take this from here and accept it as their reality differing from my own, and allowing God to fight my battles for me. Right? I am not here to fight this battle. There's nothing good will come from me, even though I have a stance here, and I have my own truth and my own beliefs, and I know where I was coming from and how I was what we were that we were coming from our heart.
Mhm.
It Nothing we said would have mattered in this situation. It would have made it worse. So I had to say, okay, I can only work on acceptance, and I'm going to give the rest to the universe, to God, to figure out how to wage this battle if there's a battle to wage because it's not mine.
And don't you think your high self-worth played into how you handled that situation? Because even though we were surprised by some things that were said, we knew in our heart that wasn't true because we knew we've been doing the things we're supposed to do.
Exactly. And
So
we're aligned to our values, and
yeah.
we communicated well, and you know, it taught me a lot about again controlling the things that I can't control. And also, um if this had happened in the past a few years ago, I think I would have had my identity. Um, I would have felt like my identity was assaulted, or I would have felt like I had a different perception of my own identity.
Mm.
Like, oh my gosh, what if what they said was true, or what if
Right,
what that happened was true?
right.
And I'm like, this time, I was like, okay, that's none of that is true.
Mm.
That's just a perception, and it's does not affect my self worth, and I
Yeah.
wish I could see that.
So your self-worth really was a safety net, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
It's a protector. It keeps you. I mean, I don't know if when you were a kid you said whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. I mean, that type of thing, it didn't stick to us, things that were said because we had a high value of self-worth. We knew that our character was always pure.
Exactly.
So,
And that's the whole idea of, boundaries. It goes back to this assertiveness and boundaries part that we just discussed. What we are only responsible for saying and doing what, with integrity and compassion and aligned to our values and goals, what we can. That's all, it's the only thing we're responsible for. How other people choose to see what I do, what you do, what anyone else does, that's on them. We can't change that. We can't control it. We can only act out of our own set of values, which is again, this whole idea of self-worth ties deeply to values.
mhm,
For me, I think for you, Paige, and for many that we work with, it really does. So that's why we focus so much. One of our branches of recovery is personal values, because when
mhm,
we're aligned to our value, aware of and aligned to our values, it makes decisions that bolster or live out our self-worth. It makes those decisions much easier.
yeah,
Yeah.
agree.
I love this list. It's a great list.
Mhm,
So, how does self-esteem impact self-worth? Ongoing low self-esteem, so again, external, can negatively affect our thinking, our self-care, our motivation, confidence, relationships, and resilience, all important elements to self-worth. In addition, chronic low self-esteem can impact overall well-being, negatively impacting one's self-worth, and it may even be a signal of a clinical issue. And I
mhm,
know that's for me, it was very true when I was, at my highest of weight and really deep in my addiction. I mean, I would leave the house and strangers would say things to me, really cruel things, or I would get made fun of, or I would, get, put down, on a regular basis, pretty much whenever I left the house. And it was at the point where I could not really function um, in my own self-worth. I had none because I felt like there was such an external negative view of me that I really, all of those things, that my self-care was affected, my motivation was affected, my confidence, of course, was shot, my relationships were tested. And I had no idea of resiliency, and my self-thought, my self-talk was very, very negatively affected. So again, I had to do some healing from the self-esteem, and I had to develop self-worth outside of the esteem that I was receiving. And that was definitely a tough thing for me to do at first, until I got enough wins under my belt internally, seeing what I was doing that aligned me to my new goals, and that built my self-worth.
mhm.
People with low self-esteem, especially those who deal with it for an extended period of time, should consider scheduling a session with a therapist, and that for sure helped me in my process. I don't think that I would be as far along in recovery as I am if I hadn't started not only on the food side, but on the emotional healing side. So I had a dietitian and a therapist, and I actually started with a therapist first, and the dietitian came in, and then I added in a trainer, and then I added in all these other,
Mm,
sort of people around me in my community to help round out the approach. But I think that 1-2 punch And again, it doesn't have to be, American Dietetics Association dietitian, but it definitely needs to be someone who we trust and can learn from, food wise, and then someone who we trust and can learn from an emotional perspective, and to process all the reasons that we're in the place we're in. And that was very, very critical. And again, if you're struggling with low self-esteem, therapists, counselors, coaches can help you get to the bottom of what's causing it and help you build it back up. And so you can start
Mm.
feeling good about yourself. Paige, how does this land for you?
Well, I think it's just really needs to be addressed because if you've got low self-esteem or self-worth, everybody in the room's paying. It's not just a solo thing. You don't pay for that alone. It affects every single relationship that you have. If you're operating from behind the eight ball from a place of weakness, somebody's got to pay for that. There's a payment that has to be made somewhere versus you're operating from a position of strength with high self-esteem, high worth, and then you're in a position to lift others up as well. So I think it's dangerous to hang out in that place of low self-esteem, low self-worth. And it's fixable. It's fixable.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I agree. I agree. It is fixable. Um, and again, when I think about, you can have the idea that high self-esteem can be there, right? So we can have high self-esteem and low self-worth. Do you think that's possible, Paige? So somebody asked me that last week. Well, they didn't ask me. They were sharing a story about having high self-esteem. They had they felt like they were having a very high opinion from others externally, that they were getting feedback from the external people in their lives and situations in their lives that gave them very high self-esteem, but they told me privately that they didn't believe any of it, that
Oh,
they felt very out of sync with what they were hearing around them. Do you think that it's possible for someone to have that high self-esteem but low self-worth?
I mean, it doesn't seem rational. I guess it must be possible. It doesn't seem right to me, but I'm sure you're going to explain how that happens. But you would think that they would go together, but there must be
I
something.
was I was curious about that. Yeah, because when this person said it, I actually was brought back to my own situation again years ago when I was getting lots of external feedback. Hey, you're doing a good job. Hey, you're changing. Hey, you're doing this, you're doing that. I was getting external feedback, but I did not believe it at first.
Because you need it to come from the inside.
Yes. Even though I was doing these things, I wasn't believing what others were telling me about me. And I had no concept of myself. Really, I had very no self-concept. So again, according to our experts, American Psychological Association says you can have high self-esteem and low self-worth. For
Hmm.
example, you can feel good about how you're performing at school or work, especially if there's a ranking system, a grading system, or you're paid well, and you can not genuinely accept aspects of yourself, especially unchangeable ones. So it's this constant state of dissonance.
Mm, interesting. So I
Mhm.
guess at the end of the day, it's important to have high self-worth and high self-esteem,
Mhm.
though it takes time to get there, is what I'm hearing you say. If you are lacking in either area, take the time to explore those feelings. If you aren't sure where to start, or you're suffering as a result of low self-esteem or low self-worth, a mental health professional would be a great partner. So now that we've laid the foundation, let's build on it by talking about how recovery affects our self-esteem.
Yeah, this is really why we're here. We want to
Yeah.
make sure anyone listening has the team assembled or is willing to assemble a team around them to talk through the needs they have here. But let's talk about this recovery side, because we know that the way we feel about ourselves is inherently tied to our addiction, right?
Mhm.
It just is, like Paige was saying earlier, when we enter recovery, we find that we have a lot of soul searching to do, and we'll begin to discover how our thoughts and behaviors contributed to our addiction. And this plays a big role in self-esteem. One thing you'll hear a lot as a member of Real Food Recovery is the affirmation that recovery is my number one priority. Paige, if recovery is truly our number one priority, what impact does it have on our self-esteem?
Well, I mean, for example, making progress in recovery has been a huge esteem booster for me. And for example, knowing ahead of an event that I can go in and not fall face first into the sugar bowl is so calming and rest assuring. I'm not perfect in every single area of my food yet, but right now, when I'm in situations that are usually it's big family events, I have the bandwidth to stay sugar free. And when I'm ready, I'm going to worry about cleaning up all other areas. So I'm smart enough to know I'm capable of doing this and doing it well. Um, and by the way, I'm squeaky clean at all other times. It's just really those big family gatherings that are a weak area for me, but so much better than before. So does that help my self-esteem? You betcha. It is something I never thought I could do before. So I feel great about all I have accomplished. And I continue to see small things showing up, like coming home from a trip and being calm, where that used to be a huge trigger for a binge for me. We'd come in, set the suitcases down, and all of a sudden I had this nervous hunger about me, and I'd start, pulling out boxes of cereal or whatever. I don't know what it was, just that aura would wash over me.
Mm,
Or now I'm better about driving in the car on long trips. I'm much more calm. I figured out how to download Netflix or podcasts or things like that. So I'm figuring out what it takes to assuage that nervous energy and calm myself down. And I used to not behave very well in airports, travel, any type of travel, where I'm basically thrown off schedule. And now I'm learning to plan that out in advance. So I fight for it every day to be a major priority in my life, especially the effort I put in planning and preparing my daily food ahead. I do a lot of work to stay safe, and it makes me feel great about myself. I mean, maybe I should even say what I feel is safe, that I can turn to myself for protection, that I know I'm going to take good care of myself. I don't need to worry that I'm not going to show up for myself and that I'm going to be vulnerable, maybe.
mhm.
So that it's safety. I'm proud of myself for keeping myself safe. And that I think ties directly into the self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth when
Yeah,
I can look at myself as a valuable resource.
yeah. So do you think, I'm going to skip here in our skip to one comment you made. Do you think for you, self-esteem is a process, or does it just come on like a light bulb?
I'm going to say I have tiny little light bulbs coming on all the time. So I definitely think it's a process. I think it's a glimmer comes on and it feels nice. I mean, aren't you familiar with that? This feels good. I feel
Mhm.
good about myself. And I like to say, hey, I like this and I think I will keep this, try it on again. I feel more comfortable in my skin and I'm able to discover who I really am. I like me. I'm really discovering I really like me. I'm an okay girl and people should want to be my friend and hang out with me. And I'm a loyal friend and I'm doing these things to take care of myself, which again sets me up to be in a position to be a better caregiver for others and help them if they have needs. But I think if you can relax into this, it'll be a much smoother ride as far as working on building this process
I
along.
agree. I agree. I too think they say in the 12-step recovery rooms, they say some people have a spiritual awakening as a light switch, and some people have it as a dimmer switch. Um, so for me, it's definitely a dimmer switch. Again, just given my history and also family of origin and early childhood experiences, being the victim of receiver of bullying and all those things. Uh,
Mhm.
I definitely think agree with you. It's a process. Um, but I would love to talk to someone who it was a moment, who it was the light switch
Oh,
when
yeah.
I had a totally different opinion of myself, and then this one thing happened, and boom, everything changed for me. I would love to talk to that person. I think there's probably a lot of them out there. And I'd love to hear the stories. The stories are probably pretty incredible. Um, we know that past experiences with people who have not valued us or perhaps treated us as less than can be triggering if we're around them again, right? That's why it's so important in recovery to manage our family interactions, our family dynamics, our families of origin. All of that matters. Do we think that we may have to change relationships with people? I'd say yes. So if someone in the past made us feel inadequate or negatively affected our self-esteem, um, Paige, what are your thoughts? Do you think these relationships have to change as we develop our self-esteem, or do you think you can hang in there and learn how to sort of grow out of those past memories or reactions?
I think that you have to learn to set boundaries.
Mm,
And for me personally, I limit exposure to those that hurt me. I think it's easier to see people for who they really are as you mature in recovery. And I think in that process, you naturally grow out of those people and organically have less desire to be around them. You almost want to be around people that mirror who you are, right?
that's right.
So if you are growing and you see growth in yourself, and you see growth in your self-esteem, see growth in your self-worth, you really just naturally gravitate, and you've got a clearer, sharper lens to
Mhm.
see those negatives in other people. And the problem is not that it's totally fine if people aren't where you are, but you can see that if it starts to pull you back down because they're uncomfortable that you're growing and progressing, that can happen. That can be a very natural thing for people to feel uncomfortable when you've got growth. You may have to set some boundaries. I've grown out of relationships. Haven't you grown out of
Yes,
relationships before in your life?
yes, yes. And I have I have grown out of family relationships and I've grown into family relationships. I've done
Hmm.
both. Those are always wonderful surprises. And I have grown out of friendships, and friends have outgrown me. And that's always it's a usually a painful experience in some ways, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot. But I just remind myself that if God wants me with a certain person, he will keep me with that person. And if he doesn't, or for any reason, I'm not the creator of the universe. I've got to trust that it's redirection.
I love when you said that once about I'm going to get this wrong here.
Rejection is redirection.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And that goes back with the acceptance we were talking about earlier, right? That
Yes.
I we could have the circumstance we were talking about earlier, we could have fought and thrown a fit and begged and pleaded and negotiated and tried to work it out, but we saw pretty clearly acceptance was the right way to go, and the relationship as we knew it had changed.
Mhm.
So we were very fortunate. Yeah, I like that. Just the rejection was redirection.
Mhm. Yeah, it was. And truly um it allowed me to remember that focusing on relationships with people who are negative or sort of tear me down or have always something negative to say um about something that they perceive. Again, it just reminds me that I can't change them. I can't change their opinions. Can't
Mhm.
change their, anything outside of me. It's up to me to sort of allow the acceptance to come and to be present for the process and to take care of my hurt feelings if I have any, or take care of my own feelings in general, period. Before I can I can never change another person. So it's really an inside job. When we're feeling hurt, when we're feeling rejected, it's an inside job. And it's also an inside job when we are feeling that rejection. It really is, I think, a time for me anyway to go to my spiritual practice and go to God and ask for wisdom and ask for discernment and ask for clarity and ask for peace during this time, because it's really the only thing that I'm in control of is just saying,
Mhm.
"Hey, can you please, I know I'm being redirected here. and I'm hurt, but what can I do in the meantime? What do I have influence over? What can you, universe or God, give me to ease my mind here? And that really does, it really does help a lot. Because there in the past I would try to white knuckle my way through something, or control something, or manipulate a situation or a person to try to get peace, and it never worked. It made things, and if it worked temporarily, it did not work in the long run. It was just like you try to get peace from that donut, or peace from that processed food, right? It never works.
Mhm.
Not in the
Yeah,
long
that really plays right into, I think, that self-worth, self-esteem, self-acceptance of saying, okay, I've got these feelings.
run.
Again, I've got enough self-worth that I can trust myself. This is how I take care of myself, and I can accept whatever comes my way because I know how to handle life.
Mhm.
And that, I think that is so huge if you're in a position to say, hey, I know how to handle life, and I'm going to start with acceptance. And instead of just curling up into the fetal position, I'm smart enough, I'm strong enough, I'm going to start problem solving here with what to do. For example, when I talked about the one 5-year-old cut the other 5-year-old's hair, and I was the guy in charge, this happened on my watch. So I could have just started sucking my thumb and pretended like I don't know. I didn't know it happened, but I started, okay, what am I going to do here? How am I going to handle this? I know I'm going to mop up the hair. I'm going to take the one home. I'm going to call a hairdresser and make an appointment. And then I'm going to call her mother and let her know what's happened, because I had to stay calm and I had to be confident in my ability to handle this situation for everyone involved. But yeah, problem solving, I think, really ties into that self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence, all that stuff, your ability to handle life on life's terms.
Agreed. Agreed.
So if you struggle in this area, then
Mhm.
we have a few tips on how to develop or enhance self-esteem. Number
And yeah,
one,
and self-worth as well. That's right. Yep.
yeah, yeah, sorry, thank you. Be kind to yourself. Try your best not to compare yourself to others, which is very hard. Comparison is the thief of joy.
So true.
Exercise regularly to release endorphins and happiness hormones like dopamine and serotonin. Jamie and I have a very strong opinion about daily movement. That is a huge, huge factor for me. And I think Jamie feels the same way. That plays into self-esteem and self-worth. You just feel, I can't remember, there was a lady political figure that talked about how she got up and exercised every morning. And then when she walked into her first meeting, she just felt a little cockier walking in after knowing she had Condoleezza Rice. She just felt a
Okay.
little cockier, hair flip walking into any meeting, knowing she had already done her exercise for the day. Next one, set realistic goals for yourself and check in with your progress regularly. We talk about this a lot in recovery about, like somebody might say, oh, I did a horrible job on vacation and had these few side steps. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's look back a year ago. How would you have done then? And it becomes very clear. Oh, wow, I am making progress. So progress, make sure that you look in the rear view mirror to really get an accurate look at what progress is looking like in your life. Next one, remember everyone makes mistakes, so don't beat yourself up when you do. A lot of times we talk about in recovery, you cannot hate yourself into recovery. So compassion goes a long way. This is tough stuff. And Jamie and I talk a lot about how we're swimming upstream in the society we're in. So a
Mhm.
lot of kudos go to people who just are showing up and doing their best every day. And then we've already talked a little bit about focus on what is within your control. Not much. It's really just your reaction to
I agree.
situations.
Yes, yes, I agree. The list continues. Another way to build self-worth and self-esteem is to make time for your hobbies and things you enjoy. That's true. Like, this is a hobby, right? Our podcast is a hobby. And so that's something that we're really, we have to make the time for. We schedule the time. I make hobbies for the things that I enjoy, make time for the hobbies and things that I enjoy on a regular basis. And that affirms my self-worth of, okay, I'm worthy of scheduling my time, taking my time, doing this for me or with others, celebrating my victories, no matter how big or small. And that's what Paige was talking about when we're working with a member who's only seeing the negative, or maybe the ways that they drop the ball. We remind them of all the hours and days that they carried the ball. So it's really, really important to celebrate our victories, no matter how small they might feel, because they're not small. Being a good friend, make time to spend with your loved ones as well. That's something that I don't take lightly. Friendship for me, for a very long time, and even still today, in some ways, friendships are, they are, because of past hurts and past situations, I am very slow to trust. And sometimes that makes I make a big mess of things as I figure out if I can trust people or not. And so it's, even though when I am in that situation, in that relationship and friendship, I am in it and enjoying it and earning trust and giving trust. It takes me when I feel like I can't trust someone or I feel like something is off, I will step back and sometimes take steps back in the trust building and trust earning process. So I have to be, I'm very selective with my friends and I have a small circle for that reason. Because there are people that once I let them in and trust them, I need to feel like I am making progress towards earning and giving trust on a consistent basis. And that's something very important to me. Um, this aligns to the one before, surrounding yourself with supportive people, right? So if I'm surrounding myself with people who, and I've been in that situation with people who criticize me or ask questions or kind of poke holes in my choices that I make, that really can do a number on our self-worth and our self-esteem,
Sure.
both, right? Internal and external. And again, having supportive people that lift us up and affirm our decisions or at least affirm us as we make a decision, all of that really helps immensely,
Mhm.
immensely. And the last on the list is, quite frankly, getting a good night's sleep is always beneficial. Yes, that is very true, because when we're sleep deprived and we don't feel, it will immediately, at least for me, it will affect my self-worth, because my thought life is not in the right place. My self-talk is not in its normal place if I'm really tired. Um, because I find that I'll be more irritable and I'll be more on edge. And I'll have a harder time seeing the bright side of things.
Mhm.
Um, so this was again a nuanced episode. We know we dove in deep here, got into a lot of psychological terms, but we really do appreciate you guys sticking with us, because Paige and I really believe this is a foundational element to recovery. And again, it is recovery for many of us is a journey into self-worth.
Yeah,
So
I
very,
agree.
very good. Um, let's transition to some listener questions here. First one, I always hear that self-esteem is good for you, but how does that differ from smugness or conceit?
I like
Yes,
that question.
it's a very good question. I used to wonder this myself, or because I did not want to be, seen as conceited.
Hmm.
There was a time where I probably had a lot of external, compliments coming my way, and it did affect my self-worth and self-esteem. And I probably had my head a little enlarged because of it. And I think of self-esteem as wanting to focus on self-improvement. Smugness or conceit, uh, in contrast, feels like you are better than someone else. So it's the whole idea of using yourself as that barometer. So if you're comparing yourself to others, that's where that ego comes in, that smugness, that judgment. But if you're saying, okay, I'm just going to compare me to me,
Yeah.
where am I compared to myself yesterday or last week or last month or last year? That's self-worth building, and that's an attempt at growing your self-esteem. Self-esteem puts us in a position not only to love ourselves, but also it's loving others, right? Because
I
again, we're coming
agree.
from a full cup. Our cup is full
Agreed.
and we're loving others. And smugness or conceit or judgment or ego is a selfish pursuit. It
Mm,
really is. It's all about you putting us in a better place, and self-esteem is not. It's knowing that we've got what we need and giving to others.
yeah. I love that comparison so much, giving to others versus giving to self.
I love it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got one more listener question. How do I know if I suffer from low self-esteem? Okay, so this was a great question too, and I'm glad that this came up. So first of all, you lack self-trust. We kind of talked about that in the podcast a little bit about how self-trust is so important, that you trust yourself when there's an emergency or life kicks you in the teeth. I'm
Mhm.
going to hang in there, and I'm not going to crumple up. I'm going to figure out how to handle this. So I think that is huge, that and you have confidence in your ability to make decisions. So, how do you know if you suffer from low self-esteem? You lack that self-trust. If you're constantly comparing yourself to others, you're a people pleaser, feelings of lack of control over your life. So you're not trusting your decisions you're making. You don't reinforce boundaries. You let people walk all over you because you're too uncomfortable to stand up for yourself. If any of those things ring true, it might be time to do some reflection and see if there are some things you could do to enhance your feelings of self-worth, as we discussed earlier. So I hope that this has been helpful, beneficial to those of you that are listening. And it's just a good barometer to listen to this and kind of see where you are on the spectrum of the self-esteem, the self-worth. And we hope that you have taken some of this information and will be able to implement it into your life. And if you want to know more about Real Food Recovery or our online food addiction recovery community, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And we hope to see you there. Thanks so much, Jamie. This has been fabulous.
It was
See you
fun.
next time, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.